Hi everybody. So it is week 6, our final week of class, and we're going to get started with our group review. Just a couple of notes as we finish up the class. First of all, thank you so much for all your hard work. It's really always just such a wonderful pleasure from my end to see the creativity and talent of all of the classes I teach, especially this class because the projects are just so interesting and I feel it really gives students a chance to do something really unique and also learn some really terrific skills in Photoshop. So it's really, I think, a really good class. And okay, so as we finish up this week, um, probably for a lot of you, you may not have to make maybe any revisions on your project, and that's pretty typical at this week's because we've been working on our assignment, our character for quite a while now. And if that's the case, you're welcome to submit it to the final submission area as always. You don't have to. I will always use this draft from this particular thread automatically. So, feel free to resubmit it, but you don't need to if you don't need to make any changes. But if I do recommend some changes, you can still continue to revise your assignment in the time we have left and submit it to the final submission area. There's always, if you have a little bit of time, it's always good to keep refining and tweaking your designs. And that's true in the real world. We tend to, as designers, work till the very last minute. Excuse me, we're known for that, overworking our designs, or in most cases it's good to, really push your designs to their fullest potential. And I think I had one other thing I wanted to mention. Maybe I don't. Oh, yeah, I guess the last one is just that our week this week is shorter, as you probably have noticed, and we are ending the class on Wednesday. So that's going to be it for our class. And after that, our class closes. I'll post final grades. I try to post them the next day. I'm traveling right now, so it may be within 2 days, but I probably will do it within a day as usual. Um, all right, let's get started. Oh, I'm working on my laptop, so I'm going to have a few things sort of interfering with the design because I don't have a lot of room to spread out my window. So I'm sorry when I want to read everybody's artist statement, so I'm going to be pulling up the threads as we go. And then we'll look back and forth at the assignment. So Francisco, let's see what you wrote here. Oh, that's an interesting idea. So how the instruments would sound if they were played together. That's so intriguing. So your character becomes like a symphony or an orchestra of sorts. And okay, and you wanted to combine sort of the idea of rock and classic. That's great. So you added a little bit of heavy metal to your inspiration. I can see that, and the classical. And okay, and so you spent a little time looking for the background. I think that is going to be that's the case for a lot of people. I think the background is such an important part. Okay, well, I think this looks really good. It looked good last week, and I think it's still looking really good. And uh, it's always this class is so much about learning the techniques in Photoshop. So we always are looking at the layers, and of course, I can see all of the layer masks that you've used throughout the project, and adjustment layers. All the different things you've been doing to work on it. And I think this looks really good. It really conveys exactly what you're looking at, that combination of rock and classical music. And I like the way you have added some really nice movement into your design. And I think the color palette it's turned out quite nicely. So yeah, good work. No changes needed. Christian, garbage dump Dan. Let's see what you wrote here. Okay, yeah, so you had your first design, your first sketch was your favorite design, and you had a concept in mind. That's good. And and then you didn't find exactly what you were hoping when you gathered your images, but it sounds like, you found replacements and you just sort of adjusted the visual to match the concept. Um, and Oh, yeah, one objective that may be overlooked is the personal growth and development as a digital artist. Totally. That is exactly really, why I think this is such a terrific project, is because it really is, our class is about that, is developing as a digital artist. And Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in this class for doing that. Okay, well, this looks great. Really nicely done. I think that it's just such a really intriguing character. Um, it's just such wonderful textures throughout, just really beautiful textures. And I think, as I've mentioned in a previous group, I really find that when you have a good amount of texture, like a good balance of texture, it really brings the design alive. And a lot of times, texture is really good texture is because the photography to begin with was good. Like the photograph really captured the lighting, if you look at all of these different elements, the photograph captured the qualities of the object. The lighting was good, it was in focus, good color, all of those things that we look for when we use photographs contribute to a good design. I think that's one of the, I would say, top things I can really think of with this class is moving forward, whenever you work with photography in any project, it doesn't have to be something like this, but anything, be really picky about the photographs you choose and make sure that they really are as good quality as you can, because that is really your raw materials. Okay, good. This looks great. I don't see any changes that you need to make. I think it looks very resolved, really beautiful sense of space and color. Okay, Jose, let's see. My objective was to create a nice character, and I did not take this as an assignment though, but more of a personal goal. Excellent. Yeah, wonderful. So you'd never made anything from scratch in Photoshop. So let's see, thumbnails, which was the doorway into the whole project. I'm glad you saw it that way because that is exactly what, it was supposed to be, was a way to just begin envisioning how the project was going to be developing. And yeah, good. Yeah, it's really good. I think this process is a very it's a very good process because I think going from drawing and then going into sort of collaging and photoshopping is is a kind of, I think there's a really good there's a good process in that's very, I think, very in I don't know what the right word I'm looking for. It's skill building, is what it is, because it's not necessarily easy to go from what you sketch to what the objects and putting it together. And so you have to use kind of a lot of sort of creativity and problem solving and just figuring out how you can bring that to life in a different form, like drawing versus photographs is quite different. Yeah, and finding images was tough, totally. Uh, Oh, good. Yeah, so you feel like you've been doing it for a while. Good. Yeah, we do a lot of practice in this class, like especially if you have a character with a lot of photographs, you do the layer mask over and over and over again, which is very good. Um, Good. And okay, so I will also say, for everybody in this class, like don't let your skills get stale. You won't totally forget them, but if you don't use them, and this has been true for me, if I don't use them for 6 months or a year or so, when I go to, let's say, do a layer mask, I have to review it again because I've forgotten some of that. So it's good to kind of keep your skills fresh. Like even if you don't use something for a project, open up, get Photoshop started, and just do a layer mask. Put an adjustment layer on it. It'll all come back to you, uh, and then you don't have to start fresh again with tutorials. Okay, so garbage dump down. That looks, yeah, I really like the shadow in that you now have. I like the softer one. That was actually the direction I was thinking of in terms of the shadow. With that's this, I like the crisp edges, but somehow it seemed more to work better. This was looking really good to kind of soften the edges here to match. And I think that really helped a lot to bring the piece together, all the different parts. Yeah, looks great. I like the staining, and that's a really interesting way to work with Garbage Dump Dan, is to make him look kind of like he's been lying around in an oil puddle, or for a while, or got some water stains on him. Um, it's just kind of a cool character and with the wheels. So yeah, your layers look great, of course. Everybody so far has been doing great with that. So this looks great. I don't see any changes you need to make. Um, so I will be back to look at, I guess today is Tuesday, so we have a deadline today. So I'll be back tomorrow to finish up our group critique. Okay, everybody, it's Wednesday. It's our final day of class, and we're going to finish up our review of people's character designs. Let me just adjust this a little bit. So, Oran, I like the changes quite a lot that you have made in your character. The name now I think is working, and I really like what you did with the hands here. I think the hands are what is starting to give it a little bit of that sense of terribleness, which I think is is part of the concept of the character is how can you convey that? How will you convey that? Some people do that in a very obvious way, and some people do that in a slightly more subtle way. And I think you're starting to get that. I could see you pushing that a little bit more, the idea of terrible toys, Todd. Um, I love the idea of him erasing everything he hugs that gives him a sense of terribleness. Um, and So I like also the socks that you added. One thing I could see you doing with the socks is perhaps playing with the color a little bit. So you've got the blue and the red that connects visually. I would say that maybe you could even turn the color of the yellow here into one of the other colors, maybe the red or blue, that's your two colors, just to make it match. Um, but otherwise, I think you've done a nice job with the colors. Um, I thought, I might have mentioned this earlier, but I thought with your background that one of the things you could try doing is maybe blurring this background a little bit area in here. I have some tutorials back in Task 2 for Milestone 4 on how to selectively blur. There's some really cool ways in Photoshop where you can take an image and instead of blurring the whole thing, which is what people will typically do, you can actually select areas. And, right back here is where we might see, back here, all of the kind of, it looks like some sort of space station or something that we're arriving at. It's a little bit distracting. So naturally in a photograph, you might expect that to blur out. So you could try that just to kind of, put more focus on your character and streamline the design even more. Those are, I think, the main suggestions here. Um, but I think you've done a nice job here at really pushing your character forward. I know you had a little bit of a rocky start in class, and I think you've really managed to catch up and do some good work in Photoshop. So if you have time, that's what I'd maybe recommend playing with a little bit more. Sapphire Raven. All right. Yeah, so you have been working with Terrible Toys, Todd, and you said you like vintage toys, and you have been experimenting a lot with different things. That's great. It's really good that you are just always, pushing your skills. That's really how you're going to develop as really any type of designer, but especially in this class, a Photoshop person. And I do like the changes you've made here with the background. There's a lot of more sort of space in the design, and I think your character seems more dimensional. That your character's in this, more three-dimensional space, which is really great. I like your new text. I think that looks quite good. And yeah, I would just say that the background, it's better. It still has little bit of problems just because there's a lot of detail back there. And if there was, if it was possible to get a room, a background of a room that didn't have so much going on in the background, I think that would be really ideal now that you have this concept. Let's see if I can. Sometimes this is my trick for when I have a background, kind of just start moving it around to see is there a place in the photograph that is going to be um, work with my foreground. Sometimes what I do too is you can see here I'm expanding it a lot, and sometimes that can really help with um, uh, finding a sort of zoomed in area, that maybe has less detail zooming in. So I don't know. I kind of like the idea of around the floor. I think the floor, what you were doing there with the floor is the the right um, the right move. Let's just zoom in a little bit more. Now, in zooming in, I may have zoomed in too far for the resolution of this image, so it's more just to sort of see it. And I'm going to, so I would even go, can you see how I'm going to the most simple little area here? So this is sort of more, I think, going to be, now again, I pixelated the background, but something that simple, and with the pixelation of the background, we're not able to see the detail of the floor, so it's a little hard to tell what that is. But can you see how that might, be a really, create a more stronger background foreground relationship? I actually like the colors back there too, because they're quite kind of muted. So I might experiment with that. I like the idea of sort of like a simple, sort of shiny, sort of linoleum floor. That almost looks like linoleum or vinyl or something like that. That could be interesting. Okay, so that's what I would experiment with. I think overall, I do like the changes you've made. Again, I could still see experimenting a little bit more down here, like I've mentioned before, and then experimenting with the colors of the flags in the hands a little bit to match things up. But yeah, I think overall you've done a good job here, and I especially like all of the different technical things you've been experimenting with. Brian, let's see here. Let's see what you said. Garbage bag. Use dirt and grass for the hair because you were hoping it would make it dirty. Old and dirty. Yeah, yeah. I think that's really, you did a wonderful job with that intention to try to make it look really grungy. It looks really, really grungy, and I think your background is just really beautiful. It's like a visually very beautiful photograph. Um, that I think the colors, it's a sort of a mixture of gray and tan that really picks up on those colors that you have in your character. So yeah, overall, I think this looks really really good. I like your text. It's sort of simple and yet has kind of um, kind of a very simple quality to it. It's not boring. It has like a character to it, but it seems to work with the kind of like haphazard quality of putting together different like different trash pieces to make a character. Let's see what's going on with your shadow here. Here's the shadow. Oh, so it looks like, yeah, I was wondering about that. It looks like maybe there's a couple different parts to your shadow, is that right? So, and it's overlapping that, so I'm noticing that. So see this shadow right in here. If it's, what I'd recommend doing is using the cast shadow tutorial from task 2 for last week, because it'll put together, it guides you through how to put together the character to build the character directly from the entire character. I don't know if I'm making sense, but so you won't have this overlap, which I think is what was throwing me off about how the shadow is working. It should be like a continuous transition there. So that could be a little tweak that you make. Everything else looks pretty good. The only other tweak that I think you could make, and you could well, okay, so the shadow, I'll just let the shadow, I was going to say maybe the shadow could be a tiny bit darker. I don't know. I kind of like the way it is. You could experiment with that. The head. So this looks like a planter, which I think is a great idea. One thing that I will notice about the planter, though, is can you see how it's sort of like, let's go to that photograph here. Can you see how like it's quite a flat rendition of the planner in the sense that, can you see how there's not a lot of light and dark that gives it a sense of roundness? You know how sometimes like if you hit a light from one side, you're going to get a shadow on one side, and so it'll be more round. And I think that especially when you don't see the background, which is good, that's what you want, you don't get that sense of a shadow, which will make this pop a little bit more. So okay, so look at this element here. I think these are olives, right? Can you see how there's this nice dark side on this side and then a light side where the light hits it here? That's what creates the sense of dimension, the three-dimensional quality, which I think is very important in this character. So, I know this is the last day and this is not a big point, but if you could, that would be a good thing to kind of quickly, there'll be tons of little white pots on the internet that you could use, and it would be easy to just slide that in there. So you could maybe do that. Those two things, would be a couple things that I think could probably really, um, you know, um, make your character even stronger. And one other thing too with your arm, something I might try with the arm is maybe it's like, see how because it's so similar in value to the background, it's getting a little lost. It's also a very delicate element. So you could try kind of tweaking it with an adjustment layer. I'm going to go here to, I don't know, hue and saturation can sometimes work. So I'm just going to add an adjustment layer here. I'm going to clip it first and see, is there a way for me to maybe, sometimes you can just try saturating. You see what I'm doing here? I'm just saturating it a tiny bit. And can you see how it's starting to pop a little bit more? So you could try that. You can go up, I don't know, we'll leave it there right now for now. Can you see how it's even maybe picking up a little bit more on the yellow here of the broom? I think this is standing out quite nicely because it's a bigger element. But if you wanted to match them, you could also maybe saturate this one a little bit more too. I may have saturated it a bit too much, but that could be something that you just kind of adjust a tiny bit as well. Okay, so those are my suggestions, very, very small suggestions. Overall, I think you did a really nice job on your design and, getting that nice grungy look to your character. Okay, Aaliyah. Okay, Aaliyah. Okay, I like this new background. I think overall it's, I can't remember what you had before. I think it was like just like like a simple background, like just a kind of wash of color. And I do think this is much better for the context of your character. Um, I still think it could be a tiny bit more simple. There's still quite a lot of detail going that you could blur out, but I do think it's much better. Um, and I like your text. I think that's pretty good in terms of, it kind of matches all of the little sprinkles you have on the donut. And yeah, so I have like sort of the same suggestions in terms of your character, the layer mask, the design, the same suggestions I had before about that you could review and work on. Um, the ellipse, I would consider just taking that out and adding a cast shadow. I think that could really work in your design. We covered how to add a cast shadow back in last week in task 2. There was a video tutorial on how to do that. And I think that could work, a shadow onto the surface here. I think you could play with your colors a little bit more. Just kind of pick a stronger color palette and stick to that. But you've got your layer mask, which is great, and that's an important part of the project. So yeah, you could continue to work on this if you want to, based on this week's feedback and last week's feedback, if you like. Oh, and don't forget, if you have time, to write your statement about your design. That's due in the discussion board area. Hey, Victoria. Yeah, I think this background is working. It's very subtle. I think it works with the idea of garden glitter grays, that sort of softness, just like diffuse light. Um, it would have been nice to have maybe a tiny bit more context to the character, but in terms of just sort of a more of a place for her, even a wall or like a floor, that she could stand on. But I do think this is, I think that this is a good compromise. It's again, it's got some interest and it certainly works well with the colors. I think the shadow is a good, really good addition here. Your text, I think, is a nice style of text. It's a little bit hard to read. It could be maybe a bit bigger or just sort of experiment with it being a little bit easier to read. And then I think your character, I think it's really come along. You've worked with the layer mask, which is great. It's got some really pretty elements. Could have a little more development. She seems a little small in the page, and maybe also just adding a little movement so that she does, she's maybe flying around or dancing or walking or doing something that's a little, adds a little more to the way she's animated. Those are just some sort of small suggestions, but I think you did a good job overall in creating her and developing her concept, and also the technical part with the layer masks and the adjustment layers, which was such an important part of this project. Annie, all right. Well, I think your character, Rockin' Rhapsody Rita, has really come along a long way here, and I think it's overall, I think the character is looking really pretty good, just like the broad strokes of the design. Um, and I like the color of the blues that you've been working with, the blues, and it looks like some green and red. So some of the things that I think you could still work on a little bit more here is, first of all, the background, I think it's a little too detailed and it looks a little pixelated. Like the image itself is a little, it has kind of a fuzzy quality, which means it's a low resolution file. So something maybe simpler and higher quality. And something, keep in mind that whatever you put behind the text is going to be, it's going to either enhance our ability to read the text or take it away. So like if let's just remove this. Um, and I think you have a white background right here. So turn that on. And so now we're starting to read the text a little bit more easily without the background. So that's just something to keep in mind. Sometimes you have to play with the text itself, and sometimes you have to play with the background or the color contrast. In terms of your character, I think you could work a little bit more on, maybe removing some flaws in your character. Like this element right here that's going across, oops, I didn't mean to pull that out of place. This element that's going across here in a way that seems a little distracting to the face. So maybe even removing this element here, using some of the features that we used in week 5 for correcting flaws. I think you could probably go through your character and work on a little bit. I'm not sure if you like the kind of stains on here. I think that they're okay, but maybe you could kind of clean up some. It looks like there's still some edges here in your layer mask that you could work on. Just tidying up things. Maybe some of the layer masks in here. Maybe smoothing the edges here. Just kind of small things, maybe kind of playing with your design just even a little bit more with the movement of your character and see if you could add a little bit more movement to it. But overall, I think, again, you've got your layer masks, you've got some adjustment layers, which is great. You developed your character. Let me see. I think that I say a little bit more too about your design process here, the objectives of your character design. Garden Glitter Grace. Yeah, it's interesting. I read what you said that, you had to really rethink the way your character would be put together based on the photographs you found, which is great that, that's one of the problem solving hurdles in this class is sometimes you find what you need and what you have envisioned, and a lot of times you have to rethink that, and that's a very good skill to have, is to be flexible and to reorganize what you're imagining. So yeah, just like last week, I think this looks really complete, really beautifully done in terms of your design and the way you put it together and the way that, all of the various parts, the text, the background, and the character came together. The colors are really beautiful. So nice job. Um, and good work, everybody. I think everybody learned a lot in this class and came up with some really interesting ideas. And I really hope you enjoyed what you learned and will continue to practice what you have gained from this class. It's been, a real pleasure as an instructor to work with you all.